The fog rolled in thick that morning, curling around the trees like ghost fingers. Private Ellis Carter lay flat on his belly in the wet leaves, his cheek pressed against cold metal. The ground smelled like death, damp earth, gunpowder, and something else. Something older. His rifle trembled slightly in his grip, not from fear, but from the chill biting through his thin gloves. His unit, the 289th Infantry Regiment, had been dug in just outside the ruins of a French village that had no name left. The signs had been blown apart weeks ago, and all that remained were scorched walls and broken memories. The Germans had pushed back harder than expected. Carter's squad lost 3 men yesterday to a sniper hiding in the church tower, and now the brass was talking about tanks, panzers no less, rolling through the valley just over the ridge. Ellis wasn't the biggest man in the squad. He wasn't the loudest or the bravest, but he could shoot. Lord, he could shoot. Back home in Mississippi, he hunted raccoons at night by sound alone, made his own scopes out of broken binoculars and reading glasses. Everyone in town thought he was nuts, until they saw the heads of copperheads nailed up on his barn wall, each one taken out from half a mile away. But that was back home. Here, in the mud and misery of war, nobody cared about stories from the woods. Not until he pulled that battered old Springfield from his duffel bag and screwed in his homemade scope. What the hell is that? Corporal Vince laughed the first time he saw it. Ellis just shrugged. It sees. Vince grabbed it, looked through it, then handed it back like it was trash. That thing's gonna get you killed, hillbilly. You seen through Coke bottles? The whole squad had laughed. Even Sergeant Dorsey cracked a smile. But Ellis didn't. He never did. He knew what he built. Every bolt, every lens, scrounged from wreckage, salvaged from the belongings of the dead, or twisted together from the guts of German optics. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Hell, it worked better than most. He adjusted the knob on the side of the scope now, watching through the mist. A faint rumble trembled through the earth, soft at first, then rising like a growl. The birds stopped singing. The wind went still. "Tank," he muttered. Sergeant Dorsey appeared behind him, breath misting in the air. "You sure?" Ellis didn't answer. He didn't need to. Through the narrow slit of his scope, he caught the glint of steel. Panzer IV, camo paint chipped and scarred, slowly rolling between 2 busted trees. Infantry followed, German boots moving with cruel rhythm. "They're headed for the bridge," Dorsey muttered, chewing the inside of his cheek. "We don't have time to call in air." Ellis didn't move. "What are you going to do, Private?" Dorsey asked. Ellis kept watching, fingers steady. "I'm going to kill that tank," Dorsey blinked. "You're out of your damn mind." "No," Ellis said. "I'm in range." Behind him, the others were already packing sandbags and prepping for retreat. No one even gave him a second glance. Just the crazy kid with the junk scope and delusions of heroism. The tank kept rolling, slow and arrogant. The infantry scattered, searching the tree lines. Ellis exhaled, long, smooth. He remembered what his grandfather said the first time he taught him to shoot. A good shot don't pull the trigger. He lets it fall. He let it fall. The crack of the Springfield shattered the fog. 1 second. 2. 3. Then came the explosion, loud, sudden, roaring like thunder through the woods. Flames shot up from the tank's rear, black smoke curling into the sky. The German infantry scattered, shouting in panic. Behind him, everything had gone silent. Then Dorsey spoke, voice low. "Holy shit." Ellis didn't smile. "Just chambered the next round." Ellis didn't move. Not right away. He stayed on the ground, cheek still resting against the stock of his rifle, watching the flames twist out of the wrecked panzer like a dying dragon. The tank's turret had lifted halfway off its body, smoking and tilted like a snapped neck. One of the German crew had been thrown clear, or what was left of him. The others didn't move. Behind him, the entire line had gone silent. No gunfire, no shouted orders. Just the wind, slowly returning like it realized the tank was finally dead. "Did he just—" one of the privates started to say. Sergeant Dorsey raised a hand to silence them. He stared at Ellis like he'd just seen a ghost crawl out of the dirt. Then finally he stepped forward. "Private Carter," he said slowly, voice tight with disbelief, "did you just knock out a Panzer before? At over 1,000 yards. With that?" Ellis didn't even blink. "Yes, sir." What the hell did you hit? Vent under the turret, weak spot. Their engineer armor didn't patch it right. Been tracking this one since yesterday. Dorsey squinted toward the distant wreck. Tracking it. With that busted-ass contraption? Ellis finally looked up, his calm face stained with mud and sweat. He gently unhooked the scope from the Springfield and held it out. Ain't busted, just ugly. The scope looked like something a child might build in a junkyard. It was thick with electrical tape, mismatched lenses, even a piece of old wire holding part of it together. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. Dorsey didn't take it, just stared at it like it might explode next. Then Private Halbrook, the radio operator, called out, "Command just got wind of the hit. They want to confirm, did we have air support inbound or not?" Dorsey turned, still half in shock. "No air, no artillery. Just Carter here and his Frankenstein rifle." There was a long pause. Then someone chuckled. It was Private Lenny, the wise-ass from Brooklyn. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, grinning. "Redneck sniper just smoked a Panzer with a homemade telescope." That broke the tension. Laughter spread down the trench. Not mocking this time. Stunned, relieved, even a little proud. Ellis didn't laugh. He never did. But he nodded once and started cleaning his rifle in silence, methodical like always. By sunset, Ellis's shot had become legend. They didn't pull out that night. Instead, command pushed them forward. Said the Germans were shaken. Said Carter's shot had opened a window and they were gonna punch through it. Dorsey pulled Ellis aside before they moved. "They're sending your name up, son. Might be a medal in your future." "I don't need a medal, sir," Ellis said, checking his scope. "What do you want, then?" "To go home." Dorsey's face softened just for a second. "Don't we all?" They advanced under moonlight, slipping through the trees. Ellis stayed behind the front line, his spotter, a kid named Brooks, trailing him like a shadow. Brooks was quiet, nervous, and always 2 steps behind. But he had sharp eyes and didn't ask dumb questions. That was enough. Round midnight, they reached the ridge where the tank had been headed earlier. German patrols were thick here, searching for the sniper who'd embarrassed them so publicly. Ellis counted 6 of them, spread in a loose arc. "Want me to call it in?" Brooks whispered. "No, too slow. They'll vanish before command can react. You gonna take 'em out?" "Some of them." Brooks looked unsure. "There's a lot of them, Carter." Ellis pulled his rifle up. "They got a lot of mistakes to pay for." He took his time, breathed slow, listened for the wind. The first shot dropped a soldier just as he raised his flare gun. The second one clipped an officer behind a tree. The third threw a helmet at a dead sprint. No sound but the whisper of the bullet. No flash but the fall of a man. The Germans panicked, shouted in every direction, firing blind into trees, wasting bullets on shadows. Ellis didn't move. He became the forest. The mud, the wind. Brooks muttered, "God damn." Ellis simply whispered, "Let 'em know we're not running anymore." By morning, the patrols were gone, either dead or too scared to return. The forest belonged to Ellis now, but deep in the valley a new engine rumbled, bigger, angrier, something worse than a Panzer was coming. And this time it wasn't going to laugh. The wind shifted on the morning of October 16th, carrying with it the distant growl of something heavier than before, deeper, slower, more mechanical. Ellis knew that sound didn't belong to a regular Panzer. It was the kind of rumble that shook the bones, not just the earth. Whatever was coming up that valley wasn't just another tank. It was something meaner, something made for revenge. Sergeant Dorsey stood over the map with a cigarette clinging to his lower lip. He jabbed at a ridge east of their current position. "Recon says it's a Tiger." The word hung in the air like a curse. Someone in the group muttered, "Christ." A Tiger wasn't just a tank. It was a damn fortress on treads, 88 mm gun. Front armor thick enough to shrug off anything but a miracle, and it hit harder than anything the Allies had on foot. Dorsey looked at Ellis. "You ever shoot one of those?" Ellis didn't answer right away. He thought about it, eyes locked on the muddy ground. "Never had the chance," he finally said. "Well," Dorsey sighed, "you might be about to." The squad moved back into position, hugging the ridgeline that overlooked the narrow pass below. The Tiger was coming through a bottleneck, flanked by infantry. It was slow, sure, but it didn't have to be fast. It just had to reach the bridge. And once it crossed, it would rip through the towns west of the river like a wolf in a hen house. The men were nervous. You could feel it in the silence. Nobody joked now, not even Lenny. Ellis sat up behind a fallen log, resting the rifle on a sandbag. Brooks lay beside him, spotting with his binoculars. The homemade scope glinted in the weak morning light. Taped, scarred, and ugly as sin. Brooks whispered, "You sure about this?" "No." Brooks blinked. "Then why are we still here?" Ellis licked his dry lips. "Because someone has to be." Through the scope, he watched the tiger crawl into view. It was massive, almost unreal. Covered in layers of thick iron, it looked less like a tank and more like a rolling nightmare. The gun barrel swung side to side, like a snake tasting the air. The German infantry moved ahead of it, sweeping the ridge. They knew someone was up here. Word of the Panzer kill had spread. Ellis could feel it, the anger in their steps. They weren't just scouting. They were hunting him. One wrong move and they'd call artillery, or worse, radio for Luftwaffe. Brooks muttered, "You can't kill that with one bullet." Ellis adjusted the scope. "No, but I can try." He'd been studying Tiger tanks in every field manual he could get his hands on. Weak points were rare, but they existed. The lower glacis plate, rear engine deck, and in the hardest one, the gunner's vision port, just under the commander's hatch. He whispered, "Come on, turn." The tank moved painfully slow, grinding metal on rock. Just before it reached the bridge, it paused, the turret rotating toward the south, scanning. And for the briefest moment, the front plate exposed the vision port. Ellis sucked in a breath, held it one shot. The trigger clicked under his finger, clean and smooth. The Springfield kicked back. Brooks held his breath. For 2 seconds, nothing happened. Then bang, a small pop like a firecracker, followed by a hiss of steam. The Tiger stopped. Smoke curled from under the hatch. The turret froze. Inside, chaos must have erupted. Sparks flying, pressure releasing, possibly fire. It wasn't destroyed, not yet, but it was blind. And a blind tiger was just a noisy coffin. Suddenly the hatch flew open. A German commander scrambled out, coughing smoke, his coat on fire. Brooks started to aim, but Ellis put a hand on his arm. "Let him run." The commander jumped to the ground and stumbled off toward the trees, screaming something in German. Down below, the infantry panicked. With their tank disabled, they had nothing to hide behind. A few fired blindly toward the ridge. But Ellis and Brooks were already gone, sliding down into the forest like ghosts. They regrouped an hour later. The Tiger was abandoned. Engineers would later find the inside, blackened with smoke and oil. The shot had pierced the vision port and ignited the optics wiring. A 1 in 1,000 shot. Dorsey caught Ellis as he returned. "That was insane." Ellis looked him dead in the eye. "It was math." The men started calling him something new after that. Not hillbilly, not scrap scope. They called him the Ghost on the Ridge, and in German radio chatter, something else began to spread, something half-spoken, half-whispered, "Der Schatten mit dem Auge," the shadow with the eye. The rain came down in sheets 2 nights later. Cold and heavy, it turned the dirt to black soup and made every footstep a betrayal. Ellis lay awake under a shredded tent flap, rifle cradled against his chest like a child. Sleep didn't come easy anymore. Not since the Tiger. He hadn't meant to become a legend. He just wanted to survive. But word had spread, and fast and loud, from command tents to frontline trenches, even through intercepted German comms. The American sniper who killed a Panzer with a garbage scope, then took the eyes out of a Tiger at over 1,000 yards. The Nazis didn't take that well. It started with whispers, then something worse, bounties. Brooks brought the news the next morning. He knelt by Ellis and pulled a rain-soaked paper from his jacket. "Found this on a dead officer," he said, voice low. "They got your name. Not just your unit, your name." Ellis unfolded the page. It was a crude sketch of him, or someone who looked a hell of a lot like him. Long rifle, narrow face, homemade scope. Below in sharp German type, "Gesucht, der amerikanische Schatten mit dem Geisterauge. Reward 50,000 Reichsmark. "They're paying for your ghost," Brooks said. 50 grand. "Dead or alive?" Ellis didn't say a word. Just tore the paper in two and tossed it into the mud. But the warning didn't go unnoticed. Within hours, Dorsey had reassigned Ellis to a forward recon unit, not as punishment, but protection. "You're too good, Carter," he said. "We can't afford to lose you to some SS bounty hunter." Ellis didn't argue. He'd spent most of his life in the woods, alone, silent, watchful. This was no different, just more blood. The new unit was small, only 5 men. They worked in shadow, weeks behind enemy lines, eyes and ears for the brass, sabotage, observation, precision hits, perfect for someone like Ellis. Their first mission was simple: slip into the Ardennes forest and locate a German fuel convoy rumored to be moving through the back roads, under heavy guard, no armor support. It was late October, and the forest was losing its leaves, painting everything in rust and dying gold. The perfect place to disappear. They moved quietly, sleeping under trees, eating cold rations, boots soaked through from morning frost. Ellis felt more at home here than he ever had in a trench. But even here the rumors followed him. Private Knox, a city kid from Detroit with a sharp mouth and jittery hands, broke the silence one night around the fire. "So," he said, flicking ashes from his cigarette, "you really hit a tiger through the vision slit." Ellis didn't look up. "Yes." "At round 200 yards?" "Yes, with that thing." Knox pointed at the rifle lying beside the fire, its taped-up scope reflecting the glow. "Yes." Knox laughed, but it was nervous. "Damn! I couldn't hit a barn with an M1 from across a street." "Maybe you ain't supposed to shoot barns," Ellis said, deadpan. The others chuckled, but there was respect in their eyes now. Not the mocking kind he used to get. This was different. Like they knew if hell came crawling through those trees, Ellis would be the last one standing. 2 days later, they found the convoy. 6 trucks, dozens of fuel drums, an officer's jeep, and 3 SS marksmen lying in wait. Ellis spotted the glint of glass first, sunlight hitting a scope. It was subtle. Most men wouldn't have noticed. But Ellis wasn't most men. Snipers. "East tree line," he said, already lowering himself into the brush. "How many?" Knox asked, voice shaking. 3. One's got a longer barrel. Probably for distance. The others are bait. The Germans were good. No doubt. They were waiting for American recon. They weren't guarding fuel, and they were fishing. But Ellis had seen this game before, and he never played fair. He crawled forward alone, vanishing into the undergrowth. Rain dripped from the trees. Birds scattered. The forest went quiet. Then a shot, crack, then another. And another. 3 shots, less than 10 seconds apart. When Ellis returned, his uniform soaked, he simply sat down beside the others and pulled out a tin of beans. Knox stared at him. "Did you get him?" Ellis took a bite. "And they're not breathing anymore." No one spoke for a long time. Somewhere in the darkness a wolf howled, and in the hearts of German snipers who might have been listening, a flicker of fear. Because now they knew. The ghost wasn't a myth. He was real. And he was hunting. The snow came early that year. Late October turned white overnight, smothering the forest in silence. The ground had gone from mud to frozen bone. Even footsteps had grown shy, muffled beneath fresh powder. The trees stood naked, watching, brittle and dead. Ellis moved slower now, not because of the cold. That didn't bother him much. It was something else. A feeling in his gut that had been growing since the night he shot the 3 snipers near the convoy. Something off. Someone was watching him. He'd felt it before, back home, tracking a mountain cat that had been stalking his dogs for days. That same hum in his spine. That same breathless instinct. Only this time, he wasn't hunting the predator. This time he was the prey. The recon unit kept moving, heading east toward the Meuse River. Fuel convoy destroyed. Mission accomplished. But command hadn't called them back. Instead, they were ordered to observe enemy movement near a small village called Waldheim, a ghost town abandoned by both sides. No resistance, no known threats. Too quiet. Knox said it first. "This ain't right." Ellis agreed, though he didn't say it. He just kept scanning the tree line through his scope. Not for infantry, not for armor. He was looking for glint, a flash of metal. A flicker of breath in cold air. A mistake. But whoever was hunting him wasn't making mistakes. They arrived at Waldheim just before dusk. Snow blanketed everything. The houses were hollow shells, roofs gone. Doors ripped open like broken mouths. A church bell tower leaned sideways, missing its bell. No birds, no rats, no bodies, just silence. They made camp inside a crumbled house, the only shelter with 4 walls still standing. Ellis refused to sleep indoors. He stayed outside under the low arch of a root cellar, wrapped in his wool coat, rifle resting across his chest. He waited. At 2:41 a.m., the wind changed, soft, subtle, the kind of shift that wouldn't bother most men. But Ellis wasn't most men. He slid his scope up slowly, scanned the ridge just west of the church tower. There, a shimmer. Not movement, just the suggestion of it. A blur where the snow wasn't falling right, like the air itself was bending. He locked in and waited. 10 minutes, 15, then a flicker of cloth. A gloved hand brushing snow. Almost nothing, but enough. He squeezed the trigger. The crack rang out like a whip. A figure dropped, clean, but Ellis didn't relax. He pulled the bolt, reloaded, and scanned left. Another shimmer. He fired again. This one didn't fall. A bullet screamed past his ear, so close he felt the heat. He rolled, crawled 2 feet to his left, heart hammering. This wasn't some SS amateur with a stolen scope. This was a counter-sniper, and not just any sniper. This was Jägerkommando, the German army's ghost killers. They weren't sent to kill random soldiers. They were sent to eliminate threats, and Ellis had become the threat. The snow fell heavier now, cloaking everything in white. He used it, breathing shallow, crawling through it like a wolf. 30 yards west, he circled behind a half-buried wagon. He waited again. 20 minutes. A single flake landed on the lip of his scope. Then another shimmer. This time he saw the face, brief, pale, cold eyes. A thin scar across the left cheek. The German was good, almost invisible, but Ellis saw him first. The shot broke the night. The figure jerked, stiffened, then dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Silence again, then a slow breath. Ellis finally exhaled. The next morning they found the body. The sniper had tags, lit Erich Voss, Jägerkommando. A black glove still gripped the rifle. A Kar 98K with a custom Zeiss scope. High-end, professional. Knox whistled low. "He was here for you, man." Ellis didn't answer. He just knelt and inspected the rifle. Clean, oiled, perfect. He looked through the scope, then back at his own. Old Ugly taped up, still breathing. Back at camp, Ellis sat alone, sharpening his knife. Brooks approached. "Why don't you sleep, man? You look like death." Ellis looked up, eyes hard. "You don't sleep when someone's got your name on a bullet." "Yeah, well, that guy had your name. You took him out." Ellis shook his head. "There'll be more." Brooks frowned. "What makes you so sure?" Ellis looked out toward the white forest, voice low and flat. "Because they stopped laughing. They buried the German sniper just outside the village." Ellis stood over the grave longer than anyone else. Didn't say a word. Just stared at the dirt, not out of respect, not out of guilt. He was studying. That man was sent to kill him, trained, equipped, and deadly. He hadn't missed by much. A few inches lower, and Ellis's skull would have been open in the snow. Command finally recalled the recon unit back west, toward the main front. The snow made movement harder, but they pushed through the forest in 2-man teams. The radio was mostly dead. Frost had warped the internals, so they were flying blind. Ellis and Brooks walked point. Quiet, like usual, snow crunching under boots. A blanket of silence draped over the woods. It was Ellis who felt it first, again. That shift in the wind, that thick sinking feeling in the gut. Like the trees were holding their breath. He slowed, held out a hand. Brooks stopped behind him. "What is it?" Brooks whispered. Ellis scanned the ridgeline. "Something's wrong, again." He looked down at the snow, then back up. No birds, no prints, no sound. He crouched and dipped his fingers into the fresh snow, lifted it to his lips, tasted salt. "Gunpowder," he muttered. "They were just here." Before Brooks could speak, it hit. A mine went off to their right, white flash, thunder in the snow. Trees shook, branches cracked. Shouts followed, not American, harsh, clipped, German. "Ambush!" Ellis yanked Brooks behind a downed pine trunk. Bullets ripped through bark like paper. Somewhere in the trees someone screamed. Another mine exploded further down the trail. It wasn't a patrol. It was a trap. The Jaeger commando hadn't failed. They'd marked the location. The Germans had planned the whole damn thing. Ellis pulled his rifle up and scanned through the scrap scope. 3 figures, dressed in white camo, moved through the snow, circling the American position. He fired once. Dropped one, rolled, fired again. Another fell, twitching. Brooks fired his sidearm wildly, hitting nothing. "We're surrounded," he shouted. "What do we do?" Ellis was already moving. "Get low! Keep moving!" "We don't stay still," they crawled. Muddy snow soaked through their uniforms. Bullets cracked overhead, stitching lines in the powder. The other teams were pinned. They couldn't fall back, not without someone distracting the shooters. Ellis knew what he had to do. He slid his rifle to Brooks. "Hold this, and listen. You circle east, flank wide. Get to the stream bed. Stay low, stay quiet. Once you hit the rocks, wait for my signal. What are you gonna do?" Ellis stared into the trees. "Make them look at me. Ellis, that's suicide. Go." He didn't wait. He grabbed 2 smoke grenades from his pack and ran straight into the clearing. Pulled the pins. Threw them wide. Thick gray clouds bloomed across the tree line. Gunfire erupted immediately. Snow kicked up in sprays. 1 bullet clipped his sleeve. Another tore through the strap on his shoulder bag. But Ellis didn't stop. He zigzagged through the smoke, sliding behind rocks, firing blind into muzzle flashes. He wasn't trying to kill them all. He was making noise, making chaos, drawing eyes, drawing fire. From the ridge, Brooks emerged, just like planned. He knelt, set up, and began firing with Ellis's rifle. 3 shots. 3 German soldiers fell. The rest panicked. They hadn't expected a counter-sniper. That's when the others, Knox and the last 2 recon boys, surged forward through the trees. Close quarters now, knives, grenades, pure desperation. It was over in minutes. The snow turned red. Later, when the sun finally showed its face, they found the bodies. 12 German commandos. Half were Jaeger trained. One carried a dossier, Ellis's name, his kill count, a photo taken from a plane weeks ago. It was personal now. Brooks handed the rifle back. "Your scope saved my life." Ellis took it gently, looked through it, even though he didn't need to. "I told you," he said softly. "It sees." That night he sat alone again, polishing the metal, checking each lens. The others tried to sleep, whispering about what had just happened. But somewhere out there more names were being written, more bullets etched with his initials, because killing a tank had made Ellis famous. But surviving the bounty had made him a problem, and the Germans were done laughing. The orders came down in the middle of the night, short, vague, and laced with urgency. New target. High-ranking Nazi engineer. Location occupied Belgium. Possible prototype armor. You are to observe, confirm identity, and eliminate if possible. Ellis didn't like it. Command didn't name the officer. Didn't explain the prototype. Didn't mention how the intel was gathered. Too many blanks. Too much noise. But the war didn't ask if you liked the mission. It just handed you the knife and pointed toward the darkness. The team prepped to move at first light. The snow had eased, but the cold was deeper than ever, biting through wool, cracking lips, numbing fingers. As they moved through the thinning trees, Ellis stayed at the rear, watching the shadows more than the trail. The ambush last week had changed him. Not broken, sharpened. The kind of sharp that knew when death was watching. They reached a farmhouse near the village of Groesbeek, just across the Belgian border. Intel said the target would be passing through, a convoy, limited escort, 48-hour window. Ellis found a high perch inside a collapsed silo with a perfect view of the road. The next morning, the convoy appeared, right on schedule. 2 motorcycles, 1 truck, 1 staff car. No tanks, too easy. He adjusted his scope and zeroed in on the rear window of the car. That's when he saw the man step out, tall, clean-shaven, black overcoat, and Ellis's blood turned to ice. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. Brooks, crouched beside him, looked over. "What, you got eyes?" Ellis didn't answer. Couldn't, because the man standing there wasn't a stranger. It was Captain Hans Kreutzer, the man who taught Ellis how to shoot. The man who had once worn the same uniform as him. Back before the war, back in the Alabama pine woods, back when Kreutzer still went by Henry Crow, an American name, a borrowed life. He'd lived in their town for years, taught kids at the range, spoke with a soft southern drawl, claimed to be from Tennessee. Everyone loved him, trusted him. But Ellis always knew something was off. His shooting was too clean, his eyes too cold. He never talked about his past. Then one day, gone. Disappeared overnight. No note, no trace. And now, standing there in an SS uniform, giving orders in German, he was back. And everything made horrible, perfect sense. "Ellis?" Brooks whispered. "You okay? You got the shot?" Ellis stayed silent. Through the scope, he watched Kreutzer, give the Nazi salute, speak into a radio, then step back into the car. He could take the shot. Right now, end him. But Ellis hesitated. Not out of fear, not because of the past, because something else was wrong. The driver, too stiff. The guardsman too far back. The road, too exposed. This wasn't a convoy. It was bait. Ellis snapped his scope left, saw it, 2 snipers in the tree line. A third on the farmhouse roof. Another crawling through the ditch. "Ambush," he hissed. "They know we're here." He yanked Brooks down just as a bullet slammed into the silo wall behind them, kicking up wood splinters. Another tore through the open window, missing his head by inches. The team scattered. Gunfire lit up the trees. The car roared off, tires spinning in the snow. Ellis grabbed his rifle and rolled out of the silo's broken wall, landing in frozen mud. He spotted one sniper, roof, fired once. Body dropped. Another in the trees. He rolled behind a trough, adjusted the scrap scope by instinct, fired through a hole in the bark. Hit. Brooks was crawling, firing his sidearm, shouting for cover. It was chaos. But in the middle of it all, Ellis's mind stayed on one thing. Henry Crow was alive, and working for the enemy. He wasn't just a ghost from Ellis's past. He was the man designing new armor, new weapons, the kind that turned wars, the kind Ellis was sent to stop. They fought their way out, dragging one wounded soldier with them, limping through snow and smoke. When they reached a safe house 4 miles out, Ellis sat alone, cleaning his rifle, jaw clenched. Brooks leaned in. "Who was that guy, Ellis? You looked like you saw a ghost." Ellis didn't answer for a long time. Then he said quietly, "He taught me everything I know." Brooks blinked. "Then why's he wearing black now?" Ellis looked up, voice hard as flint. "Because some men hide who they are until the war shows the world the truth." 2 weeks later, the snow had turned to rot. Melted slush soaked the roads, trees leaned with exhaustion, and the front line was boiling with rumors. The Germans were preparing a last push. Something massive, a final strike before the cold swallowed Europe whole. But Ellis didn't care about the war's end. Not yet. He cared about one man. Captain Hans Kreutzer, the traitor who once called himself Henry Crow, the man who taught Ellis to shoot, the man now building something new, something dangerous. Command had confirmed it. Kreutzer was leading a secret weapons project out of an underground facility deep in the Hurtgen forest, carved into an old coal mine. Unfinished armor prototypes, advanced optics, a new tank design that could withstand direct fire from even an American 90mm. Worse, field scouts had gone missing near the site. No survivors, no radio signals. So they sent Ellis, not with a unit, alone, no backup, no extraction plan. Just him, his rifle, and the scope no one trusted, except him. He hiked into the forest at dawn, wrapped in a gray tarp, blending into the skeletal trees. He moved like smoke, each step calculated. 1 foot into a frozen stream, then out onto dead moss. No prints, no sound. By noon, he found the facility entrance, masked by camo netting and 2 guards speaking low German. Ellis waited until one stepped aside to light a cigarette. Crack, 1 shot through the throat. No sound. The second guard turned, startled. Crack! Another body hit the ground. He slipped inside silently, rifle down, knife out. The tunnels were dark, damp, lit by occasional bulbs hanging on rusted wires. Machinery hummed behind thick steel doors. German engineers walked the halls in silence, unaware they were being hunted. He found a map posted to a clipboard. Test Deck C, Prototype Panther Hull and Optics Lab. Bingo, he climbed the stairs. The lab was empty except for one man, standing beside a covered machine. Kreutzer, back to him. Ellis leveled his rifle. But he didn't fire. Kreutzer spoke first in perfect English. "I figured it'd be you." Ellis froze. "Turn around." Kreutzer obeyed slowly. Same cold eyes, same calm mouth. "It's been a long time, Ellis." "Not long enough. You were always the best shot. I just taught you how to pull the trigger. You taught me how to lie." "No," Kreutzer said, stepping slightly aside from the machine. "I taught you that no one stays who they pretend to be. The war, it burns the masks off." Ellis kept his rifle up. "You betrayed the country that fed you. That gave you a name. I reclaimed the one that was mine. Germany didn't raise me, Ellis, but it's the only place that understood what I could build. What you could destroy, you mean." Kreutzer gestured to the prototype. "This tank. It could have ended the war in 3 months. No shell could pierce it. But the fools in Berlin are too late. They buried this project too deep." Ellis stepped forward, lowering the rifle just an inch. "You could have been a hero." "I am," Kreutzer said. "Just not to your side." Ellis's finger tensed. But Kreutzer smiled. "I know you, Ellis. You're not a killer. You're a hunter. You wait, you watch. You shoot only when it matters." Ellis looked through his scope. A single bead of sweat slid down Kreutzer's forehead. Then Ellis said, flat and calm, "This matters." And he pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the chamber. Kreutzer dropped like a stone, his mouth still forming the next word. Blood spread fast across the concrete. Ellis didn't wait. He planted charges on the prototype tank, on the lab doors, on the fuel lines. As he walked out, the walls shook with fire. Smoke chased him up the tunnel, but he didn't run. Outside, the forest welcomed him with silence. By the time he reached Allied lines, the facility had collapsed behind him, buried like a secret, never meant to survive the war. The next day, Command offered him a medal. He refused. They offered him leave. He said nothing. All Ellis wanted was a quiet place, some trees and distance from the world that once laughed at his scope, and the war that made it necessary. He packed his rifle, carefully wrapped the scope in a torn cloth, and walked out of camp without a word. Some said he retired in the mountains. Some say he still hunts. But every so often, when soldiers gather near campfires, a story floats through the smoke about a man who built his own scope from scrap, who made tanks explode with a single shot, and who stared down a ghost from his past and didn't blink. They don't laugh anymore. They just whisper, "The ghost on the ridge."